Janice and I watched a movie this past week called American Fiction, won an Oscar, I guess, earlier this year for Best Adapted Screenplay. And it's about writing, which is why I was attracted to wanting to watch this, but it's about a black novelist who's a good, serious writer. He's got a PhD, but he's not a successful one. His books don't sell because the American public doesn't read well-written serious fiction anymore. What they like is the shallow and the slop and the sensational. And so the garbage is what all the publishers are selling today. That's why I was drawn to the movie when I saw the premise to this. So for a joke, the main character decides to write a novel. Again, he's a black writer that meets all the modern stereotypes for what the black experience is or the black voice is thought to be. So it's urban, ghetto, rap. And guess what happens to the book? It becomes, of course, a monster bestseller. And that's what caught my interest. However, what really stood out for me and what saddened me about the movie, and I shouldn't have been, wasn't the main plot line. I found that interesting and the way they delved into it. The movie's rated R, by the way. This is not coming with a PBC seal of approval. I'm not saying you got to go see this. It's not family friendly, but it was worth seeing for us. But what broke my heart was that here is a black man with a PhD, came from a family of doctors. They're educated, they're professional, and they're dealing in the movie with all the problems that you and I face, that everybody faces. There's disease. Their mom has just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. The brother, dysfunction. The brother comes out gay, and he wonders throughout the movie if it has to do something to do with the self-absorbed father who cheated on his wife. Major trouble and trauma. How many of you have dealt with disease, dysfunction, or death in the last year? You know, most of us. Stuff that we all wrestle with. And yet, not once in this movie, dealing with all these big themes of life, does God come up in the conversation. The movie is utterly void of spirituality and empty of it. No one wrestles with the great questions of life. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Why is life so unbelievably beautiful one minute and so horribly awful the next? It is an utterly secular, godless movie. This summer, we're talking about how to develop the heart of a worshiper. An all-important subject, because God created us to know Him, to walk with Him, and to love Him, which is the very embodiment of what worship is, yes? Which means if you and I don't find a way to develop the heart of a worshiper, then you and I will have missed the highest and truest purpose for your life. You miss God, you miss everything that matters. Your life will end up being as empty a canvas as American Fiction was. And this morning, we're going to talk point blank about an aspect of worship that brings us around to asking life's greatest questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Now, in this series, if you're joining us for the first time, what we've been doing is going literally through the average worship service that Christians attend, element by element, and talking about what it has to teach us about worship and how to relate to God. So we started right at the beginning, talked about an invocation. How do you come into God's presence the first of the day? We moved on and we talked for a few weeks about the role of music in worship. That was fascinating. Last week, we picked up on a great theme that is critical to growing as a worshiper. Remember what we talked about last week? Confession. I'm glad somebody answered. I didn't want to preach that all again and start over. Confession and absolution. If life is a moral journey at its core, and it is, life is not about survival of the fittest, it's about survival of the faithful, well, then learning the discipline of confession is essential, which brings us around to the part of the service that we're talking about today, where throughout the centuries, Christians have collected the offering. And you might be thinking, what in the world does collecting an offering have to do with finding out my purpose in life? What did you expect to hear about this morning? If you knew that the subject was the offering, what did you expect to hear a teaching on? Giving. Money. That's right. Okay, here's where Pastor Bear is going to do this thing he does twice a year, where he talks to us about the importance of tithing and being generous and supporting the church with our giving. And money is part of it. I won't lie to you. But when we have our time of offering, I mean, we don't even collect money here anymore as part of our worship. How many churches have just dispensed with that altogether? But yet we have an offering time. Have you thought about that? Why do we do that? Because the offering is about more than money. And once we understand this, then my worshiping heart will grow. So this time we call the offering is one of just a couple times in the worship service where we are given a chance to directly respond to what God has done for us. So there's something very appropriate, even strategic, about having the offering after our time of confession and absolution. And you'll hear it in the words that we speak each week that Rob shared with us this morning. Why do the offering now after this? Because we just had this moment in confession and absolution where we reminded ourselves of God's unbelievable, breathtaking generosity. The fact that God would forgive us of all the ways we have broken his laws and broken his heart, that should move us in some way. You remember last week we looked at Psalm 32 and Psalm 51 in talking about confession. And we said there are three words that David uses to describe the evil that's in us. Do you remember what they were? We said transgression, which means open defiance and revolt against God. Do we do this? Can't speak for you. Check. Sin. We said sin is missing the mark of God's target for it. And we miss it, not because we're weak or blind. We miss it because we don't like God's target. And we choose another. Check. The rest of you are lying. And then we talked about iniquity. What's iniquity? It points to my faulty, perverted nature. The moral compass of my heart used to swing straight to God. Now swings straight to self and what I want. And that is to say, what Satan wants, because what Satan wants is for you not to want what God wants. You might not think of that as devil worship, but it is. And I do this also. I live for myself over and over again. All this evil, think about it, that we kick out from ourselves, God washes it away. All of it. Forgives it, removes it from me. As far as the east is from the west. You can measure the distance between north and south, but you cannot measure the distance between east and west. In other words, as far as God's concerned, our sin is gone. It is long gone. It is paid in full. When Paul says in Ephesians 1 that God has lavished on us forgiveness through the riches of his grace in Christ, this is what he's talking about. You and I will never experience such grace and goodness anywhere else in all the world. Well, now comes the time of the offering, where a person with the heart of a worshiper will ask themselves, okay, what can I possibly give to a God who has given so much for me? There's got to be a way to say thank you to God for such indescribable generosity, something I can give back. Oh, and there is. And it's a lot more than money. So what is it that we are to offer back to God? Well, we're going to come up with our own list in a few minutes, and I hope you have the note sheet today because I'm going to give you some time at the end of the talk for you to write out some of your thoughts. But I first want to take a quick detour to remind us of a biblical word or concept that we've all heard about before, but remembering it will help us answer this question. What am I to offer to God in the time of offering? And the word I'm thinking of, and we'll put it on the screen, is stewardship. How many of you heard the word stewardship? You've been in the church any length of time. It's kind of word, oh, yeah, stewardship. But if you get a grasp of what this really means, that you are a steward of God, you'll know what you should offer to God in this time of offering. In fact, you grasp stewardship. You grasp this, your life will never be the same again. You'll never have trouble getting out of bed in the morning. Looking in the mirror, trying to figure out who that person is that's looking back won't be an issue as much. And what that person in the mirror should be doing with his or her life, well, you'll find your answer with this word. Let's first define what the word means. We'll put this next slide up that kind of breaks out the Greek. The word steward comes from a Greek word oikonomos, which means household manager. Oikos means house or household. Nomos means to apportion or to manage. Put the words together. Household manager. This is a person who is in charge of running what goes on under the roof, which means this. This is no small matter. Next slide. Look at this and fill in these blanks. A steward, we're not talking about Aunt Jemima. We're not talking about Alice, if you remember the Brady Bunch. We're not talking about a doorman. A steward is entrusted with the authority, the responsibility, and the ability of acting in the name of the master. A steward is entrusted with the authority, the responsibility, and the ability of acting in the name of the master. What a powerful and privileged position this is that God has made you and I. The very first reference to humans being God's stewards comes in the very first chapter of the Bible, right in the creation story. God creates us humans, male and female, in his image, and then he gives to us what is usually called the creation mandate. In verse 28 of Genesis 1, we'll put that verse, here it is. There's 4 charges God gives us. Read it with me. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. That's stewardship language. Here is God entrusting us with the authority, the responsibility, and the ability of acting in his name. Fruitfulness, what's that? It has to do with what my life produces and what my life kicks out. It's living according to my purpose. I'm reading through a great essay by J.R.R. Tolkien right now on the imagination and why he writes fairy stories. And in the essay, he calls God the creator and humans sub-creators under God. I love that idea. God created the world perfect, but he didn't make the world complete. So, for example, God made the world beautiful, but now it's our part to make it even more beautiful in imitation of God as his sub-creators. God made the world good. Now it's our part to fill it with even more goodness. They're placed in a garden and told to keep it. And then animal husbandry, when all the animals are brought to Adam, and he names them. This is stewardship at work, right there in the creation story. And these activities point to everything else that follows in human history. Woodworking and craftsmanship and manufacturing and painting and music and jewelry. All the sciences, the culinary arts, diners, drive-ins, and dives. All this God had in mind right there in Genesis. Boating, aviation, space travel. Just take a walk down the mall in D.C. and pop into any Smithsonian, and what you will see on display is human stewardship right there in front of your eyes. God made the earth for us, and the creation mandate is God saying, this is your home, you take care of it, it'll take care of you. This great verse from Psalm 115 says, the heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he's given to the children of men, it should say. Stewardship. So let's just take a quick flyover then of the rest of the Bible and see what it says about stewardship. Stewardship is mentioned a couple more times in the Old Testament, just a couple examples. Abraham had a steward, a household manager. And Joseph himself was the steward of the house of Potiphar, if you recall. And again, don't think that we're talking about a valet or a gopher or a caddy. When it came time to find a wife for his son Isaac, which was going to be a massive undertaking for Abraham, which would mean weeks, if not months of travel, shrewd diplomatic skill, and great financial wisdom, Abraham did not go himself. He sent his steward and charged him with that responsibility. He entrusted him with the 3 things. What are they? The authority, the responsibility, and the ability to carry out his mission. Same thing was true of Joseph under Potiphar. Potiphar entrusted the entire running of his property and possessions to Joseph. There were always 2 areas in the Old Testament where stewards tended to bring their oversight. They had oversight of the master's money. In fact, the money part of stewardship is embedded in the word oikonomos, related to what English word? Economics. It's kind of a cousin of that. Money, and also stewards were responsible often for the training and education of the master's children. Paul in Galatians 4 compares God's law to a tutor or trustee, that is, a steward who will guide the child of God along until they come of age and can start running their lives responsibly as God wants. What an important discipleship lesson that is for us. Raising our young in the faith is a high act of stewardship that God gives first to Nathan, raise your hand, the parents, and secondly, to the church. We always get that mixed up. Too many parents think it's the church's responsibility to disciple their kids in the faith. Nope, we're here to supplement what God does through you. Now, New Testament, Jesus picks up this language of stewardship and applies it to his own teaching, many of his parables, and refers to us as his oikonomos. In Luke 12, Jesus teaches a parable to show us how his followers are to live between his two coming. Who then is the faithful and wise manager? Jesus is locking eyes with his disciples and with us. The word is oikonomos, whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time. It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. Man, in our discipleship and training of new believers, I do not know why we don't talk about this more often. That in coming to Christ, you not only become his follower, not only become his disciple, but you become his steward. We should talk about this more. How in you coming to Christ, he now gives you his authority, his responsibility, and ability to act in his name, to be fruitful in his name. Perhaps the most well-known stewardship parable is the parable of the talents. Lydia preached on this a few months back. Matthew 25:14. Jesus says in verse 14, "For it, the kingdom of heaven, will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property." See this stewardship language? To one he gave 5 talents, and talents doesn't refer to abilities or things like that. It's just a unit of money. But 1 talent is a huge amount of money. We're talking about years and years of income is 1 talent. This dude was given 5. To another 2. To another 1. To each according to his ability. And then the master went away. He who received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. You see that? Stewardship, responsibility, authority, ability. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and what? Dug it in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, verse 19, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And then the parable goes on to say that he commended the first 2 servants for what they did and how they invested his property. The third, not so much. Didn't end well for him. The parable of the talents is just great for so many reasons, but it illustrates what I call the 2 pillars of stewardship. And it's something that you hear me say a lot, that I am made, pillar number 1 of stewardship is knowing and saying that I am what? Made by God. Pillar number 2, I am made for God. And I'm not making that up when I say that. It's straight out of the Bible. Colossians 1, all things were created through him and for him. Psalm 100, know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. First, I am made by God. Stewards never forget this. The servants in the parable of the talents were not confused about their role at all, that they had a master, and they knew what their task was. There is a God, and I'm not him. We know that. But what a calling. I am not alone in this universe. This whole idea that I'm made by God settles any question about my identity, my worth. I have a maker. I have a master. He has given me life. I am here. You are here by God's will and desire. Think of that. And my existence here now matters to him. It matters that you are here. Turn to your neighbor right now. Just say that. I mean this sincerely. We joke about this sometimes, but say this. It matters that you're here. Let that sink in. But not only that, but I'm made for God. This is pillar number 2 of stewardship. My maker, my master, has a work for me to do. That settles the question of my purpose. Like in the parable, God gives each of us something to put to use for him. It's different for each one of us. One servant was given 5 talents, some 2, some 1. Doesn't matter. And by the way, the guy with the 1 talent was not being shortchanged because remember, 1 talent is years and years and years of wages. 1 talent. He was given more than he knew what to do with. So find out what it is. And you use it in Jesus' name. And certainly don't bury it. Remember your Walt Whitman, who said, the powerful play goes on. And you may what? You know how that line? The powerful play goes on that you may contribute a verse. I love that. That's what God enables us to do. You get to contribute a verse to this powerful play. You might say, I'm new to the faith. I'm inexperienced. I don't know enough yet. This stewardship thing doesn't apply to me, does it? Well, here's what Peter says to you, speaking to all the Christians in the church. 1 Peter 4:10. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. As each, all right, raise your hand if you belong in that word. As each has received a gift. God gives each of us something, and a lot more than a gift. We teach here at Bridgeway something called knowing your shape, which is an acronym. God has showered you with spiritual gifts, a whole cluster of them. H stands for heart. You each have passions, things that when you get out of bed in the morning and think about things, your heart just jumps within you. You've all been given abilities, more than 500 or 600 of them, according to researchers. Your personality is unique and God-given, and God can use whatever it is and however you find yourself. Say, I'm not an extrovert like you, Pastor Bear. Big deal. God uses introverts a lot more if you read your Bible. And all your experiences that you've been through, especially your painful ones, sometimes God will use those more than he will the other. As each has received a gift, use it. Serve one another as good stewards of God's very grace. Guess where the word oikonomos appears? Stewards. There it is. You may not be a leader right now. You might not have been a Christian very long. You may think that you have nothing to offer. You couldn't be more wrong. You, even little old you, barely a wing on a fly and a wart on a frog and a bump and a log in the boat and a hole at the bottom of the sea. Even you. It's a children's song we did a few weeks back. Don't you remember? There's a hole in the bottom of the sea. Yeah, we don't have to sing it right now. We'll sing it instead of our final song. We'll do that one. Even you have been given a stewardship from God to serve his kingdom and grow it and make it stronger, to help us become more fruitful, to have greater impact. That's part of your stewardship, and that's part of your worship. Did you see what we just did there? We just swerved out of our detour and came all the way back to where we began, which was asking the question about our offering. What are we to offer when we give our offering? And based on what we showed you in this little detour, we're not going to pause right here and do what we did also a few weeks ago. I'm going to give you a few minutes, give you 5 minutes to really think this through. We've got the time. And that space on your note sheet at the end, I want you to answer this question for yourself. What am I to offer when I give my offering? And another way to ask the question is, what are the things that God has given me stewardship over? I want you to think through, wrestle with God, what you believe those things might be. The list will not be exhaustive, but get it started. Determine what those things are, and then know that at the end of our lives, guess what we're going to do? All those things God gave us, we're going to come and bring them back to God and lay them at his feet and offer them to him. So we might as well start practicing that now. And I'm going to get you started. I've got a list here. I'm going to just give you something to put on your list right now. Been in 1,000 years, you never guess what we're going to put on the screen. You'd never guess. Go ahead and flash that next screen. There. My money. So you can write that on your list. There. Don't say I never gave you anything. But I came up with 15 more things. And the list is not exhaustive. Things that we are to offer to God. So show the next slide. What are we to offer when we give our offering? What are the things that God has given me stewardship over? Take 5 minutes, write out as many things as you can think of. We'll just leave that slide up there for our friends at home. And if you're at home with this, do this exercise with us. It's just you and Jesus right now. Do not waste this time. We'll call you back in a few minutes. Here's what I have. We'll just run these real quick. And I'm going to make these scriptures available. You're not going to have time to write them all down. But here's, in addition to money, my spiritual life, what Calvin said. John 15:4, Jesus saying, abide in me and I in you. I'm responsible for that. Next, my home. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Next, my marriage. What God has joined, let no one separate. Next, my relationships. As far as it depends on you, live peaceably at all. You're a steward of your relationships. Next, God makes you a steward in your community. Seek the welfare of the city in which God has planted you, because if it prospers, you'll prosper. Next, widows, orphans, the poor, and oppressed. Yes, we're steward to them, to care for them. Next, my church, using the gifts to serve the common good of what God is doing in His church. Everyone should be involved. It shouldn't be 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. In a faithful church where everyone's acting as stewards, you won't have problem filling the ministry needs. Everyone will be volunteering, wanting to be a part. Contribute, serve, give. Next, my passions and their talents, learning my shape, as that verse from 1 Peter, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another. And we're going to be coming out with a new seminar this fall that'll teach you your shape, and it's going to be a great workshop. Next, my words, set a guard over my lips, David said. We're a steward of what comes out of here. Ouch. Next, someone said, my time. Teach us, Lord, to number our days. I think that was Sharon, right? Yes. Next, my work. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not for men, knowing that from the Lord you'll receive the inheritance of your reward. I think that's the last one. Oh, my body. Oh, forget about the body. Let's just, no, my body, so critical. And, yeah, there's a whole much. My mind, boom, next. My emotions. Why are you cast down, O my soul? The narrative. Hope in God. We're responsible to bring that in line. Next. Is that it? And the earth. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it. The earth is the Lord's and its fullness thereof. We're to take care of the earth, manage it well. Any more? Boy, I was on a roll. My dear friends, hear me out. Just 2 more minutes. Any idea you might have that you don't need God to be the front and center of your life? Any idea you have that when disease or death or dysfunction or despair strikes at you, that you're all alone and you got to figure this out for yourself? Any idea that you have that your life has no meaning, no purpose, that you're nothing but space dust? Any idea you have that you have nothing to give, nothing to offer? My friends, all of this is nothing but an American fiction. Don't you believe it? You were made by God and for God. Whatever it is that you decide to believe about life, you're a steward of that in the end. We can't force you to believe any certain way. But understand this, whatever that is you believe about life of ultimate importance, you're going to need faith to believe that. The idea that there is no God that you're accountable to, that's the reasonable view, that's the scientific view. Oh, no. It takes faith to believe that. There's plenty of evidence for God. In fact, I think it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a believer. So that being the case, why not believe in this? Why not believe Jesus when he says he is the way and the truth and the life? No one ever spoke like him. There's evidence for you. No one ever lived like him. Perfectly sinless and holy. Find sin in him. You can't. No one ever had the wisdom that he did. No one ever did the things that he did. No one ever fulfilled ancient prophecies like he did. No one ever loved like him. He gave his life for you and me to rescue us from evil and to set us back on that path that we might live out our intended created purpose. And no one ever rose from the dead like he did. It's true. It happened. He's true. So believe him and receive him and follow him. Nothing will change your life for the better like Jesus Christ.